You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Tristan, podcast number 1 on March 29th. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. What are we talking about today? Oh, one of my earphones seems off. What are we talking about today? We are talking about the remaining homeless people told to leave fenced off Echo Park Lake. Los Angeles Police Department detains dozens of protesters. I don't know if you've been following the Echo Park saga, but it's just outside of downtown LA. It's north of Skid Row. It's across the freeway from Skid Row. It's just to the west of Dodger Stadium, if that means anything to you. I did a quick look on my Google map. My LA geography isn't great, but it's enough to be dangerous. So it's kind of in that area where you're gonna have homeless, and I think they had like 250 tents at one point in time around on one side of this really nice park in downtown LA. LA is going to be spending $500,000 to clean up kind of what's going on here. And this story touches on a lot of different themes going on. A lot of people want to just let the homeless kind of do their thing. Hey, let them be. They're not really doing anything. That's a common theme that I see in people who haven't kind of been well versed in the whole homelessness thing. And when you have homelessness set up camps, you get tent city in your parks, it basically means nobody else can use those parks, legit, right? So we've got situations here in city I live in, Bellevue, where you've got a few of these popping up and people are either like freaking out or they're like, just leave them be. You're not being compassionate enough. This story is going to touch on a lot of those. Do I have answers for this stuff? No, I really don't. But I know kind of the vast majority of folks that I talk to that kind of are of my mindset, probably of your mindset of being reasonable. You can't have the homeless putting tents up in city parks and basically taking over. That doesn't work. Over this past weekend, I went and saw one of my kids in Seattle who lives in Seattle. He lives in Queen Anne, which is to the north, just a little bit of downtown. It's a nice area. It's fine there. And we went through Denny Park, which is one of the parks that I have done a number of stories on. I think Denny Park had like 60 tents at one point in time, and it's been cleaned out. And so I went there, took some video. It looks great. But man, the amount of work that had to have been done. They literally took a grader in there and graded out the park to make it level. They've got topsoil in there. They've got bark, just a whole bunch of work. So $500,000 for Echo Park Lake area in LA doesn't surprise me at all. It's a number of acres big. I don't know. Is it 10 acres? I have no idea. I've seen video on it on German in Venice, and he did a couple of great videos that detailed the whole shutdown of the park because they had to clear it out, get all the tents out, start from scratch, get it clean, get all the needles, all that good stuff out of there, and then basically, start over and start doing it. And in the meantime, you got protesters there. That's what we're reading about. If you're new here, my name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, and I read the news that reasonable people want to hear. All right. And when I say reasonable, I'm kind of making fun because who doesn't say, I'm reasonable. I'm going to watch that guy's show. I'm going to watch his whatever he's doing. What is this joker talking about? Well, stay tuned. You'll find out because we're about to get into it. All right. This is from KTLA out of Los Angeles. The remaining homeless people living along Echo Park Lake were to leave by 10:30 p.m. as police continued to clash with protesters for a second night Thursday over the clearing of the long-running encampment there. It is a big encampment. And in all defense of the footage I saw, which was wildly different than kind of how it goes down here in Seattle, it looked like the protesters that were there looked like they were actually normal people protesting homeless people being evicted from a park. It wasn't our black bloc friends who dress all in black out looking for a fight, using this issue to kind of hijack their own narrative, right? It didn't look like that. And to be honest, Echo Park, I know it was loaded up with tents from the homelessness, but it was as far as homeless encampments go, it looked like it was pretty clean, pretty well run. But still, We've got zoning laws for a reason, and the city parks are meant for the enjoyment of all the citizens. And when you've got a whole bunch of people that are down on their luck who are experiencing homelessness, the city parks are not the place for them. And that's why we have laws in place that, this kind of thing happens and police go in and clear it out. So Los Angeles police declared an unlawful assembly shortly after 8 p.m. to begin clearing a crowd of about 250 protesters. 250, that's a crowd. That kind of crowd could go sideways pretty easy. And media from the area of Lemoyne Street and Park Avenue after some demonstrators began flashing lights at officers in riot gear. Well, the cops show up in riot gear because you get a couple 250 people. That goes sideways. You're a cop. You want to be wearing riot gear, right? And if you look at some of the protesters, they're wearing helmets and they're there. They're geared up for a confrontation. They are not just, holding some signs, standing nicely on the sidewalk and leaving when they're told to leave. No, they're actively protesting homeless being evicted from a park. Here's a tweet from LAPD headquarters. The LAPD has declared an unlawful assembly in the area of Lemoyne due to a large crowd that is utilizing high-intensity lights. They use the lasers that are brutal in an attempt to blind officers and prevent them from performing their duties and or defend themselves if needed. You blind somebody, they're pretty helpless. A dispersal order has been given at Lemoyne and Park. A designated protest zone has been established on Glendale Boulevard north of Park for the Echo Park incident. A media viewing area has been established at the northwest corner of Glendale Boulevard and Park. And that's where I think I saw German in Venice filming a bunch of his stuff. And he's just a guy who's lived in Venice, California, for 30 years. He's got a YouTube channel. Check him out. He does a great job. He just gets in there and goes and gets his good footage. He gets footage that to me is like, man, I wouldn't be walking that close to a lot of those areas. I'd give myself a little distance, but I think a lot of people know him and he's got long hair. He kind of gets a hall pass. Whereas I go in there, people think I'm a cop, right? Demonstration has moved back to Lemoyne. Some protesters flashing lights at cops chanting, "You go home, we go home." Is that really their legit chant? You go home, we go home. Okay. Yeah, whatever. Some of the chants that come up at these protests, you're like, what? Okay. I'm just going to ignore that because I can't figure that out. Not really understanding your side of things, but, whatever. So Los Angeles Times reporter James Quealy tweeted that LAPD declared everyone in the area was under arrest and no longer free to leave. At some point in time, you have to draw that line and tell everybody, you've got to get out. We're clearing this park. This is what we're doing today, right now. And that's when, the S really hits the fan, right? And then people get all worked up. Oh, I know that you've had signs posted for the last 2, 3, 4 days, whatever the ordinance is in Los Angeles, that you're going to be doing a sweep. And everybody knows it. Everybody knows it's coming. But then they act all indignant of, oh, why are you doing this? Well, because we said we're going to, because it's a safety hazard. A lot of people are critical that it's a safety hazard. And that's why the police are able to come in and do this. Well, it is a safety hazard. You've got a whole bunch of homeless people who are living in a city park that shouldn't be living there, that don't have the services that, they should be provided with. This isn't the place for them. If you got mental issues, if you've got substance abuse issues, living in a city park, that's not the right place. And it's also not the right place for the tax-paying citizens who are paying for basically the use of this park. They can't use it. They don't want to use it. That whole drill. It's kind of brutal. When I was at Denny Park here in Seattle over the weekend, I did see parents with a couple of kids briefly walk by the play structure that had been not used for months and months and months when the homeless encampment was in there. One of the kids hopped on one of the things, and then I think the parents kind of just brought him along. But there are people walking dogs in the park. I think it's kind of getting that gentrification. It's coming back because they cleared it out. It's landscaped. There's no fencing around it. So this is a normal cycle. There will be tents back in there guaranteed because now the attention's going to be on a different park somewhere else that's got all the tents. So all the attention goes to that. Then those people go from that park back to this park. And how long will the park here, how long will this be cleared out for? I don't know, a couple of months, $500,000 to go back in there and clean it out. At about 8:45, the LA Times shared video from another reporter showing to 𝒂𝒕𝒕𝒍 being taken into custody, reporters being taken into custody. And by reporter, that is a loose term for anybody who puts up anything on social media, right? I mean, it just is. Back in my day, back in the late 1600s, the only people that were reporters were from major media outlets. And now because of social media, everybody's a reporter. I'm a reporter. I'm press. People write press in crayon and put it on their shirt. I'm press. Everybody knows they're not press. And yet, they kind of are for whatever their medium is. The Times said it was working to verify reports of his arrest. The guy was in a place that the police had said, hey, you're out of here. Get out of here. Leave. Otherwise, we're going to arrest you. And at some point in time, like I said, they have to drop the hammer and arrest people. And that's what they did. Then at 9:24 p.m., another Times reporter tweeted that 𝒂𝒕𝒕𝒍 had been released. They're just trying to get people out of there. They're not, hey, you were protesting. We're going to take you down. No, they're just literally trying to clear the area, secure the area, get it to the point where they can operate it, put a fence around it, get it cleared out. That's what's going on. And that's what the law dictates. And if you don't like the law, vote. Kind of simple as that, right? Spectrum News reporter Kate Cagle also tweeted video of herself being carried away from the crowd by police officers. All right. Yeah. I mean, if you're in a spot where you're not supposed to be and the police say, hey, we're clearing it out, what do you think's going to happen? I don't know. You're probably going to get taken out. So another reporter in their crowd, Lexis Oliver Ray of LA Taco, said multiple legal observers were also detained. Okay, what kind of legal observers were they? I'm questioning that, right? Ray shared video of officers violently arresting a protester as they aimed less lethal rounds toward the crowd and eye level. They weren't violently arresting anybody. The guy was being squirrely, and they put him in a holding position. I mean, stuff is so silly, so silly. Violently. Oh, there was just violence. Nah. The guy didn't want to leave, and they subdued him. That's what's going on. Sky 5 arrived above the scene around 9:15 p.m. as officers were handcuffing dozens of protesters remaining on Park Avenue one by one. They did not resist, and the group was removed by 10:30. So this is the exact song and dance that goes on at these deals. You get a bunch of people that are really worked up about the whole scenario. And I understand that, but the thing is you can't have homeless people living in the parks. That's a hard line for me. And then when you've got folks that are like, oh, but where's your sense of compassion for humanity? Well, it's not in letting them live in an area they shouldn't be and letting them shoot up whatever, exposing themselves to all kinds of stuff that goes on in these homeless encampments. Because if you read, the news stories about any of this stuff at all, you will realize, okay, there's 50, 60 crimes in there. Some of them, they're doing some hardcore criming. This is R-rated criming, right? I mean, that's what goes on because you've got a certain, number of people who they're addicts straight up and they need money for their addictions and they're going to do whatever it takes to get that money. They're going to do whatever criming they need to, right? Police were also stationed throughout other parts of the neighborhood, which appeared to be empty except for officers. That's where I saw German in Venice. He was covering a lot of those. That guy does a lot of walking. He's got to be a fast walker. He just gets there. Multiple black law enforcement buses were brought in to cart away demonstrators en masse. Officers were seen carrying some protesters away by their arms and legs. They just, there's like one guy grabs one hand, another guy grabs another hand, somebody else grabs another knee, foot, whatever. And they literally just, haul them out. It's just the game that's played, right? Los Angeles Police Department could not immediately confirm how many demonstrators were detained or arrested, nor do we really care. We just care, hey, did the park get cleared out? Like, cop said it was going to. It did? Okay, awesome, great. Let's see what that looks like. Sky 5 had been over the scene at 6 p.m. as dozens of protesters blocked the intersection of Sunset Boulevard and Lemoyne Street. By 6:45, people began marching east down Sunset past Echo Park Avenue. Another group of demonstrators was further south in Lemoyne, where police had set up a skirmish line. Don't cross this line, we will skirmish. Sky 5 left the scene at 7 p.m., at which point the protest had remained peaceful. A heavy police presence was still in place on Glendale Boulevard and Park Avenue Thursday morning, as a fence was put up to close off the park, and protesters were still in the area as well. Roughly 30 to 40 tents could still be seen scattered behind the fencing, but the people living in those tents were told they would have to leave. No one else may enter. 24-hour notice for those in the park to leave. Housing resources are being provided to everyone. Los Angeles Police Chief Michael Moore. That's an interesting name, right? Michael Moore? Oh, you're the police chief. Interesting. Not the filmmaker. Michael Moore tweeted shortly before midnight. And here's his tweet. Our people will remain in the area around Echo Park tonight as fencing is being installed. They put up those fences like no city workers I have ever seen. I watched it go up in Portland and I watched it go up in Seattle, and it's like, wow, these guys are fast. You know, they get that mandate. Hey, we need to get this area secured as best you're going to secure it. We need to get this up and done. So I think they just do a full court press. And, they bang out the fencing. Those already inside the park and tents will be allowed to remain overnight. No one else may enter. 24-hour notice for those in the park to leave. Housing resources are being provided to everyone. All right. So that's what they did, right? Police attempting to clear the encampment Wednesday night were met by several hundred protesters who believe it is wrong to move homeless residents out of the park. Another major thing that we've had, another kind of part of this story is the CDC has said, yeah, during the pandemic, don't clear out any homeless encampments. Don't do it. It's going to spread. And so a lot of this stuff has just grown and grown and grown as far as the encampments have gone. Take a look at German in Venice. Take a look at his footage of how Venice looks right now. It's not the scene that the Doors encountered when they got going way back in the 60s. It doesn't look like that at all. It looks more like Escape from New York, right? Just kind of, it's like, whoa, what planet do we land on here? Los Angeles Police Department declared 2 unlawful assemblies and gave an order to disperse from Santa Ynez Street and Glendale Boulevard. Police said officers were being assaulted with rocks, bottles, and smoke bombs. All right, so the protesters at this point in time were no longer peaceful, pelting them with rocks, bottles, and smoke bombs. An LA Times reporter at the scene said he witnessed police firing from a launcher, and a freelance journalist who was there, not as a reporter, said an officer wielding a baton left him with a broken arm. Really? Okay. So what did you do to deserve being hit by a cop with a baton? Were you peacefully protesting, but not so peaceful? That's the story I always want to hear. I don't read these stories and go, okay, a cop just walked up to him and just, boom, bashed him in the arm and broke it. Nah, there's always something. There's always something behind it. And yet these news narratives are like, oh, cops are bad, protesters good. Some pushing and shoving was seen on video between police and protesters as smoke filled the air. Uh-oh. Got some smoke going up in the air. Police later dismissed social media reports that tear gas was deployed, saying instead the smoke was caused by incendiary devices utilized by demonstrators. They do that. It's like a smoke screen, right? You throw up a bunch of smoke and people are like, ooh, what are we doing here? Are the police tear gassing us? Is that what's going on? No, it's demonstrators half the time. They do these little smoke bombs. They're kind of like, they're like fireworks, right? And all of a sudden, you get fireworks, smoke, just kind of adds to the whole vibe of the place. Like, ooh, something bad is going to happen here. And if people followed what the police told them to do, which is basically clear the area, you wouldn't have this crazy stuff go on, right? Nobody would get arrested, whatever. One person, later identified as 26-year-old Nicole Partori, was arrested for failing to comply with orders from a police officer. The police department stated in a news release. Partori was cited and released. I don't really care about that. I just want to see the police take the park back and city workers get going. Because there's always going to be a bunch of people at these things that are like, oh, I'm fighting for the cause. And they get arrested, and it's like, okay, whatever. 2 use of force complaints were made, but no injuries to demonstrators or officers reported, according to the police department. During CHOP here in the city of Seattle, we had over 19,000 complaints, of which a couple were really investigated. A couple. So basically just a bunch of nonsense is what the city of Seattle Police Department is dealing with. In the days leading up to the confrontation, city workers started posting signs that those living in the park would need to pack up their belongings and leave. And like I said, they usually give a 3-day lead time. It's not like all of a sudden. They understand these people, they got to pack up all their stuff. They don't typically have cars. They're going to use shopping carts to move to their new area. They got to secure their stuff. I mean, it's a total hassle, but let's be honest. These people are living in a city park. What do you expect? And I think most of them are resolved to the idea of, all right, it was a pretty good run. I got to move on. Damn it, I got to find a new spot. But they're living for free off your and my tax money maintaining these areas, and then we can't use the city parks. There's an argument, hey, you could coexist. Well, you start looking at some of the crime reports that come out of these homeless encampments in our city parks. Those are not parks that I want to use. I mean, there's just crazy stuff going on. Crazy stuff. Nonetheless, there was no clear timeline given, leading to complaints of lack of transparency and poor communication. Hey, we're doing this. We can't tell you exactly when, because there's a million moving pieces. This is what we're doing. You've been given fair warning, right? Neighbors have complained about drug use, crime, and trash. Shocking. From the 200-plus tents surrounding Echo Park Lake, though many have also been critical of Councilman Mitch O'Farrell's response and how he handled the sweep. There is always complaining about whatever politician pulled the trigger on it. An online petition on change.org titled Save Echo Park Lake describes the park as virtually unusable and states it is becoming Skid Row. Skid Row in LA is, I haven't been there. I've never been there. Probably because the last time I was in LA, I took my kids there and, hey, Kieran and Brennan, you guys want to go to Skid Row? They would have said yes. Their mom would have said, hell no. And I probably would have agreed with my ex-wife as to why we were not taking our children to Skid Row. That's stuff they don't need to see. Skid Row now is, it's pretty rough. I mean, you see news reports coming out of that area all the time. It's not a good look, right? It calls on city officials to restore the lake and build housing. O'Farrell said in a previous statement that the park's closure will remain for repairs to lighting, plumbing, and other much needed improvements. Because all of this stuff, like the electrical gets jacked around, people they start splicing into power lines. They dig up the earth in some encampments. You've just got a whole bunch of big laundry list of stuff that the city does when they go in and take. It's not like they just, let's mow the lawn now that the tents are up and go. That's a big job. $500,000 of taxpayers' money on top of all the money for police to come through and clear this out. And I'm sure a bunch of legal stuff. How much does this come out to? Is it $600,000-700,000? I don't know. Is it $1 million when you're all said and done? It's a lot. It's a lot for a city like LA that is baroque. On Thursday, O'Farrell spoke during a news conference and described the operation as very successful. He said that 161 individuals experiencing homelessness, plus 5 more who were in transit to state-funded hotel rooms Thursday morning, would be provided safe shelter that included 3 meals a day, medical services if needed, and other supportive services. O'Farrell insisted the park would not be closed indefinitely, but expects it to take between 3 to 5 weeks for maintenance and repair workers to complete nearly $500,000 of work. Which reminds me, there's a video on this channel that you're watching this on. And if you're watching it on YouTube, I kind of did with a police escort a day or two after CHOP was cleared out. I got back in. I just went to CHOP with a couple of my people and we walked around and we got some footage of the cleanup going on. So you can kind of watch what happens in a cleanup. Just these massive commercial grade trucks with power washers, guys painting, doing landscaping. I mean, they were going literally to town. Had to do that with a police escort because it was Cal Anderson Park in CHOP that had been cleared out. And they kept that closed for, I think that was in November, December. And they kept that closed until officially closed until just recently when they had a reopening because they were doing so much work. And it's kind of a hot spot for protests to start. Homeless encampments, they pop up there super quick. And so they're just trying to keep the park cleared for a while. I think it's kind of hopeless long term. There's going to be people in there, homeless people in there. But I did do more of a kind of a drive around some of the areas that I knew a lot of tent encampments were in downtown Seattle. A lot of them have been cleared up. Cleared out. City's gone through, got things kind of squared away. It feels like spring cleaning and going back to school, something like that. It's like, all right, city knows that the workers are going to be going back to their worker bee towers of business. So we got to do something to make this a little bit more palatable because Seattle and Portland and a lot of other cities have had a rough look with the pandemic because you just can't move people basically off the streets. You can't move them anywhere. And so I think a lot of this stuff is going on kind of behind the scenes, maybe low key, so that you can avoid, having 250 people show up and protest, which is, the cops are basically just following their orders. And somebody has said, hey, enough is enough. Enough stuff going on in our parks that's not legit, that's not in line with the law. We're getting everybody out. We're moving on. So that is the saga of Echo Park. And that's been kind of a big one. And you're going to see more and more of this stuff because I think you're at that point where people are like, hey, we can't use our parks. And so you've got all these people who are protesting. And here in Seattle, let's be honest, Antifa hops on that bandwagon, just Johnny on the spot. Oh, there's an encampment. They will use kind of any cause to further their cause of getting out there and doing the quote unquote peaceful protesting. So you don't even see a lot of Black Lives Matter stuff anymore, right? You're just not really seeing that at all. You didn't have a bunch of Black Lives Matter here at Echo Park. You also didn't have Antifa there. You've got that in Seattle and you got that in Portland. I mean, it must be just a real Northwest thing. LA, from what I could see and all the stories that I've read, it was basically the people who were there protesting were legit concerned for homeless people and their plight. And I don't want to see homeless people basically just boxed up and kept out of the eye of society. That's not my thing. But they can't live in parks either. And most of them, they need some mental health care and or they need some substance abuse issues, right? They need help going down both those directions. But for so many of them, they just want to live in a park and continue their lifestyle. And that's where the real conflict is, because then normal citizens and their kids and their pets don't feel comfortable, can't really use it. And the reason you live in some of these areas, because they've got great parks. When you can't use those parks, it's kind of like the downtown areas with COVID. All right, there's all kinds of cool stuff here normally, but it's closed. We can't use it. This is a no-go. So that's just what we're doing. All right, so that's it on this one. Echo Park has been cleared out. We'll take a look. I'll do some stories and on follow-up on this, but that's a big park, $500,000 taxpayers' money going to clean it up. from something that could have been prevented right off the bat. But political leadership in LA, such as it is, and they've got a lot of stuff, probably more pressing than this to handle. But our park's overrun with homelessness. As this story continues, I will bring it to you right here in the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Once again, thanks for being part of the show. Love to have you subscribe, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, because that way you get notified each time we have a video coming out. And right now it's twice a day. We got twice a day, Monday through Friday, and then we release just once on Saturday and Sunday. So enjoy the rest of your day, whatever you're doing out there. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch up with you on another one. We'll talk soon. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.